Due to the following CBS School Break special, Magnum PI will not be seen today. It will be broadcast tomorrow in the regular time period.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
That's, me kind of doing a very light take on the version of Batman I was raised by, which is sort of post Neil Adams take, which he was doing the year I was born. Neil Adams was redefining the character kind of in the cracks and corners of DC when he was first a cover artist on a lot of the Batman books in the late 60s, and then once they gave him sort of the run of the place, his look, he kind of exaggerated even more with the lighting and the grandeur, the way he would exaggerate the figure form, the length of the ears, the length of the cape. A lot of it was just sort of aesthetics. He wasn't really changing the costume per se. I tried to illustrate what Adams did with a sense of maybe somewhat photo exacting kind of take on it, while also kind of avoiding some of the comic book tropes of the glowing white eyes, which I was always having a problem with as a kid, thinking about like how the mask is pretty much on his face like it's makeup. Like it's as close to the skin as you can get the way it was drawn by everybody, Adams included. And if that's the case, there's no room to hide the eyelashes for the human being wearing this mask, so basically just his natural eyes showing, but you can hide that in shadow.
Welcome back, everybody. Time again for a new Word Balloon, but more importantly, a new Trek Watch. All the regulars are on an away mission in Baltimore, the last day of the Baltimore Comic-Con. But I am always happy to welcome back Ed Whitfield, Opinionoid, to Word Balloon. Ed, great to see you. Thanks for doing this as always.
Great to see you, John. Thanks for inviting me back.
Well, man, we have an embarrassment of riches since our last conversation.
Yeah.
The first two Lower Decks and Star Trek Day. I don't know if you watched Star Trek Day.
We celebrate in England, but a little bit quieter, than in the US.
I wasn't sure because it really Star Trek Day. I mean, it always is a commercial for Paramount Plus.
Yeah,
but it certainly wasn't abbreviated Star Trek Day broadcast because of, I'm sure, the writers or the actors strike, and they really focused on Jerry O'Connell and the guy that plays Rutherford, and of course Tawny Newsome, who's Mariner on Lower Decks. And that's fine. They're animation actors, so they can do it. Also, oddly, a celebration of Star Trek animation because it's the 50th anniversary of the original animated series.
Yes.
Which I'm a massive fan of. I do love that show. Did you watch that show when you were a kid?
I did. I loved it. And I was a little, I guess we're going to talk about the very short trek to Skin a Cat, which they put up as a tribute. And I don't know, there's two ways you can look at that, I suppose. You can look at it as a sort of affectionate, tongue-in-cheek homage to the animated series, or you can see it as a sort of another example of the people who are making Trek now not really understanding the central appeal of the thing that they're, riffing on or referring to. But I'm sure we'll get into that. I just wanted to say we saw a very small clip here in England. We didn't get the full, you didn't
get the 3 minute actual full thing?
No. Sorry, we got that. But I was just going to say, because you mentioned at the top the Star Trek Day thing, Jerry O'Connell and so on. I just wonder if you thought it was weird that he seemed to be doing an impression of Will Wheaton from the.
Yeah.
The Ready Room. What's going on there? What's that about?
I don't know. And it's I was telling you off the air, I had the pleasure of meeting Jerry and Rebecca Romaine and well, I've met Frakes before, but it was nice seeing Frakes again, and Jeffrey Combs. They were all at Terrificon in Connecticut. And really, like, Jerry is a very gregarious guy. And my friend and I were in the green room talking amongst ourselves. And maybe one of us looked up and saw him, but he walked up to us. And we're just sitting at one of the tables in the green room. How you doing? My name's Jerry. I'm like, yeah, I know who you are. I'm like, I was planning to talk to you. He didn't have an autograph booth. He was really there to accompany Rebecca Romaine in her table, and he would work the line as people were waiting to get an autograph and a photo with Rebecca, and was just charming as hell. And how you doing? Nice to see. Oh, I'm so glad you came. Whatever. And of course, everyone was delighted to meet him. Commander Ransom, of course, on Lower Decks.
Yeah.
But he was a little too cloying and I'm sure that's how they're directing him.
I was going to say, it was so close to Will Wheaton. If you squinted, it was like Will Wheaton was there. And I was watching it. I was thinking, has he been directed to talk that way? Or why not just present with your own sort of personality? What is this kind of affected, strange kind of parody of a Star Trek geek that they do? Or are they both like that? Because every time you see Will Wheaton these days, he seems to be doing the same shtick. And you think, well, has something happened to them? And, in middle age? And what's going on?
No, I really
what's wrong with them, John?
Yeah, they amp up the glee to a really embarrassing level if you're at all an adult. And also, don't you think, Ed, it underlines this subtext of, I think, New Trek in general, where they play at Star Trek. They're not, and you certainly don't want to come off as one of these uber nerds, and maybe I will, as taking it way too seriously. But it's like, it's entertaining enough without it having to be utzed in Yiddish terms. Every 5 minutes of, isn't this silly? Isn't it silly that we love this silly thing?
Yeah. I know what you mean, and it's almost an attempt to tell you how to feel, rather than allowing you just to feel something because you have a natural affection for it and so on. It's almost like, John, they don't trust the audience.
Yes, I think that's true, and I certainly think that's the case of this new audience that they are trying to attract and go, hey, Star Trek's fun. Isn't Star Trek fun? And it's like, yeah, it is fun. Of course it is. But again, tone it down. God, one of the things in Star Trek Day that annoyed the hell out of me was they went through all the new shows and this is what Discovery is, and this is what Picard is, and this is what Strange New Worlds is. And they got to Strange New Worlds, and they're like, Strange New Worlds that features the early adventures of the Enterprise, but also they went into it. I'm going to misspeak the actual words, but essentially, like, this show plays with a lot of genres, from comedy to musical to whatever. And it's like, oh shit, I think they just told us season 3 is going to be more bullshit and less Star Trek. And it's like, man, you guys think you are so goddamn clever, and it's so annoying. It is so annoying.
They have said, I think, quite openly that they intend to double down in season 3 on what they've done in season 2. There was an article, I'm sure you read, or maybe I can't think who it was who was quoted, but as a member of the Strange New World sort of writers' room, and they were saying, hey, we wish we could go for 20 episodes a year. It'd be great to go for 20 episodes a year, just like the old Star Trek TV season. And you're sitting there thinking, fuck, what would you do with 20 episodes? Look at the damage you've done with 10. Would it be twice as bad if you ran?
And I did read an article that was more of, I guess, slightly critical, saying, were there too many gimmicks in a 10-episode season? And I'm like, yes, very much so. And that's why maybe
a rhetorical question, really.
Yeah, exactly. But was very positive about each gimmick episode. Spock being human, the musical episode. What was the other gimmick of the year? Oh, the crossover, of course. Now, listen, we haven't talked, Ed. I don't remember if our last conversation we talked about the crossover. I'll even say I liked the crossover. I thought it was fine for what it was.
It depends, of course, how much you like Lower Decks, doesn't it? I mean, that's the key factor. You know, if this was an import from a show you love with two characters that you really delighted to see in live action, then yeah, it was a perfectly light-hearted and enjoyable episode. But if you think that all the characters in Lower Decks are irritants who have no place in the Star Trek universe, then seeing them in live action is sort of doubly insulting. It's like, oh my God, here they are, and they're even louder and more immediate than they were in their own show. So I personally didn't like it, but only because, as I'm sure we'll come to, I find Lower Decks almost excruciating. I mean, it's very hard for me to watch it.
Well, that's interesting, Ed, because honestly, I did feel that Boimler and Mariner as live action characters were a bit toned down, in my personal opinion. I mean, listen, and I feel so bad.
It's just seeing them in the flesh, I suppose. It just, it feels like they're a bit closer to you, doesn't it?
Well, whatever. It just, again, I felt Boimler was less, even though there were moments where, he and Spock blew up whatever they were working on, and some panicky moments here and there, and nervous moments here and there. First of all, and maybe we've discussed this before. I know I have when I talk about Lower Decks. When I think I'm watching bad comedy, people speak louder and faster to kind of let you almost go, all right, we know this isn't that good, but we'll get through it. Let's just get through this scene, And I always feel like that is a recurring thing in Lower Decks. And certainly the second episode that they dropped this week, I really hated with a passion. But I like I said, I did feel in the crossover they were a little quieter, a little more real, as they should have been, being in real life. But again, to me, really good. Like The Simpsons doesn't scream at you the way Lower Decks does, and other really good animated King of the Hill, one of my absolute favorite shows, was an animated situation comedy that happened to be animated, would have played just as well as a live action thing. And it was people speaking in normal tones. I like low key smart humor. I don't like over the top idiot humor.
I agree. I agree with that. But I think that, maybe it's worth taking a step back and just talking about why Lower Decks isn't funny. If it isn't funny, if you don't find it funny, I wouldn't wish to presume either way. But let's imagine for a moment that Lower Decks is stultifyingly unfunny. If that's true, then perhaps the reason is because it exists in this kind of zany comic universe in which everybody's on and everyone's in on the joke. Okay. Now, for me, I think you have some sympathy with this. The best kind of comedy for me involves that sort of tension between the real world, the sort of grounded real world or grounded dramatic situation, and characters who have a comic sensibility. So I would give the golden example of this being the original Ghostbusters, the 1984 Ghostbusters. If you look at the difference between it and the 2016 remake of Ghostbusters, forget all the gender politics crap for a moment, put that to one side. We're talking purely about tone here, okay? In the 1984 movie, the film is set ostensibly in the real world, and the comedy comes from that tension between characters like Venkman and characters like Walter Peck and so on and all the rest of it.
Yes.
In the 2016 movie, it's a Dayglow bubblegum comedy sketch universe in which everybody's on and everybody's going for the gag. Not very funny or smart gags, mostly sort of improvised bullshit, but that's the difference. Now, Lower Decks to me is like the 2016 Ghostbusters, not the original, sadly. If it were the original, then you'd be like, okay, there's room here, because we may have talked about this before. The idea of a Star Trek sitcom is not ludicrous. It could work.
Sure.
Right? But tone is very important. Trying to find the humor, the right type of humor to make it work so it doesn't belittle Star Trek. It doesn't draw attention to its it's more sort of zany or kooky elements, and we will talk about the season 4 premiere 2 Vix, which I think, is a prime example of getting it wrong, but we'll come back to that momentarily. Okay. So here's the thing, right? You've got a show in Lower Decks that is hemmed in my opinion, right? So it can't be too off the wall or meta, because if it was, then it would not be able to coexist within the Star Trek universe. It couldn't sit alongside TNG, Voyager, DS9, or whatever. If it's going to have any pretensions to be part of that universe, it has to be somehow constrained. It can't be Rick and Morty, for example, that riffs on sci-fi conventions and all the rest of it. But it can't be too irreverent either. But it can't be Red Dwarf, for example.
Right. Loved Red Dwarf. Yeah.
Right. But Red Dwarf is a show where obviously it's set in its own universe, but it's also a show that is sending up science fiction in general. There's a famous scene in Red Dwarf where Rimmer's saying something kind of stoic and philosophical and all the rest of it, and Lister, who's just woken up with a hangover, says, "Look, don't give me that Star Trek crap. It's just too early in the morning." All of this. So they know about, it's a world in which all of this stuff exists, and they understand what the tropes are and the conventions are. But a show set in the Star Trek universe shouldn't be aware of the tropes and conventions. It shouldn't be a show where all the characters have the same cultural reference points as the audience. That's the fatal flaw in it. Why do they have the same cultural reference points as the audience? Why are they as excited about seeing the Voyager again as we are? Because that's all these writers have got. That's their only source of information. That's their only source of comic inspiration. They can't go too far in either direction. So they have to draw on the universe itself and sort of eat it, if you like. They're kind of like that creature in the second episode that sucks the bones out of the out of the beings and leaves them in a sort of heap of loose skin, That's what Lower Decks is doing to the Star Trek franchise. It's sucking on its bones, essentially, right? So, sorry, I was just going to say...
No, finish your thought, please, Ed.
Yeah, so where I'm going with all of this, it sounds like people are listening to this thinking, he's going somewhere? Yes, I am. It's not just a tangential rant. What type of humor could work as a Star Trek sitcom? That's the point, right? Now, I was thinking about this because I knew I was going to come on and talk to you about this. And I thought, well, there must be like a model where you can satirize or draw attention to the insanity in certain situations without belittling the situation itself or making a mockery per se of the universe. And the model I came up with, which I'm sure a lot of people will say, Ed, I don't think that this is a good analogy, but go ahead, run with it, is the UK sitcom Blackadder Goes Forth. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with Blackadder.
Very much so. And especially...
Blackadder, for those who don't know, in the US is a sitcom, a BBC sitcom, which is set in different historic periods. And basically each series... it's about 6 episodes, and it picks up in different eras in British history with the descendants of the previous characters, finding each other again, if you like, and being in that situation.
I'm much more of a Blackadder fan than I am a Mr. Bean fan. It's Rowan Atkinson.
Right.
And I appreciate the physicality of Mr. Bean, but there really is a lot more clever things going on in the various series of Blackadder. Please continue.
Indeed, and Blackadder is very much deadpan, irreverent, sardonic humor. It's sarcastic humor, if you like. And the 4th season is set in the First World War, in the trenches, the First World War. Now, initially, you think, okay, on paper, this could be problematic, right? Are they going to mock the people who fought and died in the First World War? But no, they're not, because the gags, there are jokes about the deprivations, about having to eat rats and all the rest of it, and the ludicrous, the cheap value that's placed on human life. In one episode, Blackadder is brought before a court-martial because he shot a messaging pigeon, and before he shoots it, he says, look, with 50,000 men being killed every week, who's going to miss a pigeon? But it's the favorite pigeon of the local general, so it gets in front of him. All of this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now, here's the point, right? Because there is one, I promise. The point is, if you can make a sitcom about the First World War, about being in the trenches, about being in the mud with the rats and 50,000 people being killed every day, and still finish on a really poignant moment, because I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but the final episode of that show ends with a deeply moving scene, which I won't spoil. But the point, but I'm sure you can guess the gist of it, right? Spoiler, they don't all go home and live happily ever after.
No.
Okay, so here's the point, right? Where do they mine the humor from? They mine it from the ludicrous, the insanity of the situation. But you still feel throughout the whole thing that there is a serious point being made, a serious undercurrent to the whole thing. They're not trivializing it. They're not saying that these men are stupid. They're saying that they're victims. They're victims of elitist thinking. They're victims of, a sort of very flippant attitude to human life. They're victims of a incredibly unlikely political situation, which has brought them all into this ridiculous war of attrition, which is, not winnable in any real sense, So
yeah.
Now, if they can make a sitcom out of that, someone can make a sitcom set in the Star Trek universe that does not dilute the seriousness of all of the situations that Starfleet officers might get into, whether it be war or life-threatening situations on other planets and so on and so on. All it requires is somebody with a little bit of wit and intelligence and an understanding of rooting the humor in the characters and their interactions, rather than making a mockery of the universe around you. And I know Mike McMahon would say, oh, but we're not doing that. We're not punching down. We're not, well, all I would say to him is maybe he should watch his own show. Because, Tuvix, which TWO Vix, the 4th season opener, which is a sort of sequel to Tuvix.
Certainly.
Look, here's the thing. Tuvix, the Voyager episode, is silly enough as it is. It doesn't need to be spoofed. Yeah, I mean, they put a reference to Threshold in that episode as well, I noticed.
Again, the robotic salamanders, absolutely.
The robotic salamanders, yeah. And I just thought to myself, look, this is a bit like the difference between Scream and Scary Movie, right? The people who made Scary Movie didn't get the memo that Scream is a sort of self-aware meta horror movie that's both been a great horror movie, but is also having fun with horror movie conventions.
100%. Absolutely.
You don't need to spoof it. You're spoofing a spoof in a way.
Right. 100%.
That to me was like the relationship between Tuvix and Tuvix.
I'll be honest, Ed, and maybe I've been beaten into submission, but of the 2 episodes, I actually liked Tuvix, because I have accepted that this is, as you've aptly described it, this is what Lower Decks is. Lower Decks is, remember every goofy moment of Star Trek, well, we're going to take a piss on it. And that's fine. And again, I guess I've accepted that. But, and I didn't mind. I didn't. I liked seeing Voyager. Much like Deep Space Nine last season, they did a great job of presenting Voyager again. In a design standpoint, it was great seeing all the backgrounds and the various parts of the ship. Yeah. And it was cute seeing as they're establishing this Voyager as a museum on Earth, seeing the mannequins that have the costumes on and everything. all that's fine. And I didn't mind this two Vex, and I didn't mind the premise. I love that they threw in the evil clown and Chaotica and Michael Sullivan.
Yeah.
And even like the brief moment where Michael Sullivan, first of all, falls in love with Mariner, and then also later says, "I miss my wife." Those were okay because again, I've accepted the premise. What drives me nuts is the second episode and this insistence that, oh no, Mariner being a jerk is really, really funny, and it's like, no, it really, really isn't. And it was just, well, I know, and Ransom's trying to screw up my promotion. Well, I'm going to screw it up myself. And it's like, to what end? There's no logic. I mean, there has to be logic behind clever humor, and there was none. And
their logic was that they all want to be together, don't they? But they don't want too much responsibility, which of course is exactly
only Mariner. The other three want the responsibility and love being on the ship. But mentioning that, Ed, forgive me real fast. The whole, and again, as opposed to Blackadder, that would have a serious moment or a good character moment over, they just keep coming back to, well, isn't it great that we're all together and we're all a team? And it's so great that we all like each other. And it's like, is this My Little Pony? Friendship is magic? I'm like, come on, be smarter than that. And this is the adult animated show, which is ironic. Also, by the way, Star Trek Day. Hey, as Langley pointed out in the comments, we're celebrating animation, but we're gonna blow off Prodigy. And I get it. It was a commercial for Paramount Plus. It's not. I mean, even the first season isn't on Paramount Plus anymore. But by the same token, there was this real irony that all of us, as loyal Star Trek fans, are going, "Wow, you're celebrating animation, and Prodigy is one of the best animated Trek products." I think it's a very good show.
Well, let's loop back for a moment. What did you think of that very short Trek that paid homage?
Oh no, we'll get to it. Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to talk about it now. What drove me nuts about it, and let's start off with one of the establishing shots. And right there, now I know they build this man in gold as, air quotes, the captain.
Yeah.
But come on. Come on. Please don't gaslight us. We all know who this is supposed to be. And also, I will say it's a shame because a really great comedian and a very sweet guy, Pete Holmes. I don't know how much or where you are of his humor, but he is, first of all, a very devoted nerd and has made very funny parodies of X-Men and Batman and Bane and all these things over the years. So I understand. It was interesting. A friend of mine was like, hey, how come they didn't use Paul Wesley? I'm like, no disrespect to Paul Wesley. I don't know if he could carry the comedy. But regardless, I think calling him the captain rather than Kirk, when we obviously know, come on, it's supposed to be Jim Kirk. Give me a fucking break. Of course, it's Jim Kirk who is racially insensitive, alien insensitive, and it's their go-to move of, once again, the white guy's the moron in this equation. And so I really didn't mind. And again, I have enough of a sense of humor of the premise of somebody saying something like, oh, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And then we cut to Emrys. Hey, what are you talking about? All right, fine. And then, whatever the fish metaphor was, and even the absurdity. Oh, I don't have it up yet. But the bloomers, the woman with the bloomers character, and the screw
knickers in a twist, etc., etc.
Right, all of that, and it's fun. Yeah, knickers in a twist, and I forget what the butthead and the screw characters were offended by.
But maybe it's best we don't remember that one.
Yeah, indeed, they're not that funny.
Some jokes weren't meant to be remembered.
I don't know, Ed, if Bazooka Bubblegum made it to the UK, but it's this little piece of bubblegum, and it's always wrapped around a little comic strip. And the humor in those is so bad and so weak that when somebody gets too punny on my show, I go, hey, the main character is called Bazooka Joe. And it's like, yeah, Bazooka Joe, save your jokes for the gum wrappers.
Yeah.
We don't.
Save jokes for Lower Decks.
Absolutely.
It was very much Lower Decks like humor, though, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah, and again, I don't. They've telegraphed what these very short treks are going to be.
Yeah,
I don't mind. It's it's a shame because clearly they got their inspiration from those marvelous Voyager and TNG short animated things that are on
which
YouTube.
were genuinely great.
Amazing. And yeah, and again, I mean, we talked about it earlier. We love the original Filmation show, and I love the aesthetic of the Filmation show. And it's certainly, there is room to play with that stuff in both. Wow, wouldn't that have been cool if there was a Next Generation Filmation cartoon, or if there had been a Voyager one? So I don't mind the basic idea, and I'm sure this is a great example of what we're going to get in subsequent very short treks.
Well, the people who did it, who made the shorts that ate the style of the animated series, got it right, because they understood that the key to the humor is playing it straight. The style is the joke.
Yes.
There doesn't need to be any actual joking in the dialogue or anything like that. In fact, I think I'm right in saying that for the Voyager one, they just did Threshold.
Right.
And, cut and paste the audio track from Threshold and animate it. Brilliant. And they did, I think, for the TNG one, it was Best of Both Worlds, I think I'm right in saying. But that's the joke. You watch it and you go, oh, it's funny because it's in that kind of cheap animation style that Filmation did. But, there was a certain charm to that.
100%. Yes.
So, that very short trek to Skin a Cat fundamentally misunderstands the affection that exists for the animated series. I think it has to make fun of it, because in the mind of the people who are making Star Trek now, the animated ones are the kind of facetious ones, the flippant ones, the humorous ones, the ones where you can tell stupid jokes. That's what the realm of animation is for. Not that I wish to put words in their mouth, but I think that's what they think.
I think you're right.
That's the evidence that that's what I draw from the evidence. But anyway, there you go.
Well, and maybe that's why Prodigy doesn't fit their idea of what animated Star Trek should be. I don't know. But in fact, here I want to go back to some. Langley is killing it with some of these comments. Prodigy is far and away a better animated Trek series than Lower Decks, and is much more mature, and it's for kids. Yeah, I completely agree, Langley. And it's a shame. I wonder when we will hear that Lower Decks, or rather Prodigy, has found its new home. I'm leaning towards probably Amazon. They haven't made the official announcement, but the fact that we got that scene of the Doctor, the holographic Doctor, as part of Prodigy season 2, that they put it out there. Well, there must be. I mean, unless the Haberman brothers are doing things without Paramount's permission and releasing this stuff, I doubt that's the case. I don't know.
If Prodigy is a more successful show, it would be because whatever the target demographic is, it takes the Star Trek universe seriously. That's the key difference. People who watch Prodigy know it comes from a place of sincerity, whereas Lower Decks. I understand why some people like Lower Decks. I understand why you like Lower Decks. I'm not attacking you for enjoying it. Okay?
Oh, no, not at all. And truly, I'm usually the negative voice when I review Star Trek. And I love that we have a slightly difference of opinion. But no, there are things about Lower Decks that absolutely still annoys me.
But I get it, because the instinct that you're sort of just letting go, you're just saying, yeah, I'm going to go with it.
It is what it is. Yeah.
It is what it is. But also, it appeals to, it's designed to appeal to the Trek fan, the nostalgic Trek fan in all of us. Sure. And for cynics, bitter cynics like me, see, I have to keep that stuff down. I have to pour water on that in order to maintain a clear head when I'm watching Lower Decks. I can completely understand people who just say, just give into it, just submit to it. It's like bleeding out in a warm bath, isn't it? Am I going to call for help? No. I'm just going to let myself die, because there's no pain and it's all right. It feels pretty good.
A lobster slowly boiling to death. Yes,
Right. You know, he's comfortable. Why get out of the pot? So that's Lower Decks for me. It is bleeding out slowly. Okay. I mean, when you watch it, you say, "Oh, okay, I get it. I get it. Everybody who watches a show is a Star Trek fan. Blah blah blah. They don't understand, of course, by referring to it this way, by making the universe smaller, by flaunting their geek credentials. They are inadvertently destroying the thing that they love. But okay, let's let them carry on with it. Blah blah blah. You know, Pete, the poor bastards who've read my reviews, they've heard all the jokes before, but you know, it's like a sex doll of your ex-girlfriend. You know, it looks like her, it feels like her, and so on and so on, but it's got no head and no heart. you know, it is like being trapped with those people in the Star Trek experience at Las Vegas who had to cosplay as Star Trek characters. And what if you went to the Star Trek experience in Las Vegas? First of all, good for you, because it was great. Yep, yes, indeed. How I miss it. I'd go again if it was still there.
So true. My God.
Yeah. But when I was there, I remember going around, like, you know, doing the tour, and I always remember the girl who took me around, and she was asking us questions like, "Hey, do you know what Lacars means?" and stuff like that. And I was like, "Yeah, I do know what Lacars mean." Blah 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 blah. Now that would be it. That's like being trapped on the set of Lower Decks. You know, all of the characters know everything. They know what you know, and they're gonna prove to you that they have those Star Trek credentials by talking about it every single moment of every single episode. But while they're doing that, the opportunity to tell a real Star Trek story in the non-meta, non-self-aware Star Trek universe, i.e. the real Star Trek universe, has been missed.
Yes.
So every episode of Lower Decks is a wasted opportunity. And we're now into season 4, and it's obviously never going to end. It's always going to be like this until it finally is axed, which hopefully will be when Secret Hideout are shown the door. But we can get into that. You know, but that's my principal objection to Lower Decks. And when I looked at those first 2 episodes, I thought, with episode 1, here is a show that is satirizing a show that does not need to be, or parodying a show doesn't need to be parodied, because it's already sort of a self-parody, although one, it must be said, that has a very powerful conclusion, right? Before we say Tuvix, the Voyager episode is schlock, we should remember it does have like a really sinister and interesting final 5 minutes, philosophically really interesting, which the Lower Decks episode brushes off with a joke. Well, like, Janeway's solution was to kill him. Let's hope whoever doesn't find out. Okay, yeah, we know. It's very funny, but it wasn't funny when we watched it the first time.
It was weird. At the same time, it was such a goofy premise, but then it had this very serious, are you going to kill this life form? And now I really went from years teasing, and I have a friend that whenever they'd show the rerun of Tuvix, I would send him a screen cap of Tuvix and go, "Look, it's Tuvix." And now it's like, wow, that really was a good high-minded science fiction idea of, this is a new life form. What do we do with it? Are we doing the right thing? And you're right. You're absolutely right. It's and that's why it's smart. It plays on various levels, and it really is, at the end of the day, and certainly the crew's reaction to Tuvix, the original, the real Tuvix, was much more, I don't know what to do with this. I mean, my God, poor Kes, her mentor and her lover are merged. I mean, and I will even concede that in Lower Decks, with the Doctor merging with the engineer, and Jenks, the security guy, going, "Yeah, how much do you remember about whatever?" And that freaked out look on their face,
yes,
you know, it was great.
But the thing about the Lower Decks episode was that the thing with if you take the original episode, the original Voyager episode,
Sure.
Goofy premise, as you say, schlocky premise. Hey, let's merge two characters in a transporter accident. But they don't play it for humor. They play it straight. They tease out the philosophical implications of it, and it ends with an absolute sucker punch of a denouement where the Doctor says, I'm not going to do it. I won't participate. This is murder. I understand why you're doing it, but ethically, I can't participate in this. Really interesting end to that episode. Now, then you get to the Lower Decks episode. Now, remember, the Lower Decks is constrained, okay, because it's supposed to be Star Trek, but of course it's also got to be funny. And so having spent, like 3/4 of the episode mocking Tuvix, they can't then go for the serious coda because that would kill the humor. So what do? They get out of it by merging everybody together into this unsentient blob of flesh and arms and hair and mouths, this hideous sort of conglomeration of personnel. And Tendi says, oh, it's okay. It's not sentient anymore. It can't think. So by separating it out, there's no moral dilemma. There's nothing to worry about. It's just the sort of the end to that episode. It's just a way for them to undo it to get into that thorny philosophical territory, because the way that Lower Decks is set up, you can't do it. You can't get into real gut punching, philosophical territory, because everything is a goof, everything is a joke, everything is a throwaway line. And the point is, the humor comes from the recognition that we have of the things that they're playing around with, the sort of the references that they're pulling on from different episodes. And that is not enough to sustain a show on its own. It's fine for a one-off spoof or whatever that is not linked to canon, is not linked to the Star Trek universe. But as a strategy for telling stories in the real Star Trek universe, it's catastrophic for the integrity of that show. When they try to bring in serious elements, like you can feel the tension, you can feel Mike McMahon behind the scenes sweating, going, oh, I want to tell real Star Trek stories, but I can't because the format of my show doesn't allow. So he has like season-long arcs, I forget what the arc was in season 3. There was something.
And now I'm misremembering. I know the Packlids. Maybe that was season 2.
But I think that was season 2.
But you've got the evil ship that they
evil ship in this season, which we've seen destroy now a Klingon bird of prey and a Romulan warbird or another.
Yes.
So that's your semi-serious thread that's going to run through this batch of episodes, because that's the frustrated Star Trek writers in that writer's room. They desperately want to tell a real story in the TNG universe, but they can't because, they're hamstrung by the fact that they have to toss off every episode and make it absurd. And they will come back to it, and it will be a semi-serious threat, like the Texas class starships were at the end of the
right. That's what it wasn't. That was last year's
right. That was the thing.
Ed, I'll even say, truly, both in the case of the Packlids and the Texas class ships, I thought they kind of succeeded. And again, maybe I'm being beaten down by. But and even this I find intriguing and am willing to see how it unfolds. I hope it's good. But again,
did you feel the threat? Did you feel the threat the same way as you felt, for example, when the Borg were attacking the Federation, the fleet at the end of Star Trek Picard?
I'll be honest. When it came to that, I rolled my eyes as much as they tried to make it dramatic. And I'm like, again with the goddamn Borg? Can you come up with something? And especially, I don't think they explain it. In fact, in subsequent interviews with Terry Matalas, I think he even said, I wish we had more time to explain the Changeling Borg relationship. And it's like, you had time. You just used it poorly. And
yeah, I mean, I
really...
still don't understand how the Borg Queen met the rogue changelings and how they got together and planned it all out
without assimilation. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I know what you mean. I suppose what I'm talking about is the sense that because Picard season 3, whatever the plot holes or the various problems with it, blah blah blah, and we agree that there are many problems with it. Whatever, cast all that to one side for a moment. Just concentrate on the final episode and the actual sense of threat. Okay, all right, it didn't make a whole lot of sense, but because the show was ostensibly serious and because it was set in what we presume to be a kind of canonical timeline, so there's real consequences to what's going on and so on and so on, you feel a degree of anticipation, a degree of excitement about what's going on. In Lower Decks, I don't think you can really feel anything because
I agree.
You're so numb because of how light and frivolous it is, and how it's all about trading on your memories of better shows that had dramatic integrity. As we discussed earlier, you can have it both ways. You can have a show that has real emotional beats and real dramatic stakes and still be funny. They're not mutually exclusive.
I agree.
Someone send a memo to Mike McMahon and tell him that that's the case.
I don't think it's Mike. I think it's really, again, Kurtzman and the overlords that, again, have simplified Star Trek to the point where, well, Lower Decks can only be funny. I mean, God, they even that cliffhanger of Captain Freeman on Lower Decks being taken away and it's like, okay, like, yeah, where's this coming from and why? And it's like, you're trying to make us care. This is the farcical, silly comedy. What are you doing? And again, I think Prodigy, I'm telling you, man, I don't know how much you watch Prodigy, Ed, but really,
I've not seen a lot of it because bits and pieces, because of course I've, as I was saying to you last time I was on, I was ready to sit down and watch it, and then they took it off.
Oh yeah, okay.
So I've just seen segments of it. I haven't seen it.
Well, they redeemed Ocampa, the Billy Campbell character from Next Generation season 2, and they gave him an actually interesting storyline 20 years later, 30 years later, whatever. Oh, wow. And it was good. And I mean, that's the thing. It's like there is a subtlety to the way the Habermans and the Prodigy writers are really approaching this. It's driving me nuts, man. I really wanted to talk to them. And thankfully, we have mutual friends. Two of the Prodigy writers are good friends of mine. And they happen to watch when I had their sisters. It's ironic, the Habermans being brothers. And these are sister writers that work together on Prodigy. And I'm like, hey, I really want you guys on Word Balloon, because they were in the chat. And they're like, oh, yeah, no problem. And then they're like, something, it'd be better if we just wait until season 2 comes out. And then everything happened, both the withdrawal of season 1 on Paramount Plus, us not knowing where season 2 is going to get a home, and then, of course, the writer's strike and the actor's strike. And I should just reach out to them because it seems like, obviously, animation is not under the restrictions that the live-action people are.
Right.
I'll see if they're willing to talk about it. Maybe they wouldn't want to, and they'd probably want to wait until at least the announcement is made of season 2 and where it's going to hit. I am reasonably certain some streamer will see the value of this show and want to run it. But no, you're right. We can have it both ways. And I just think that and you might be right. It might be McMahon as well. Kind of.
Well, I'll tell you. Shall I tell you why I suspect him? Okay, so so this is why. It's because of the origin of Lower Decks. Lower Decks, as we all know, began as a fan account on Twitter called TNG Season 8.
Correct.
And this was just a stream of irreverent tweets that imagined a ludicrous continuation of TNG, in which you had premises which were so outrageous and so stupid and so surreal that they belong on Voyager, not on TNG. But anyway, right, so I can't remember any of them specifically, but an example of them, something like it would be Worf's bitten in the crotch by an alien parasite, and his testicles swell to the size of a moon, and it creates such gravity that the Enterprise is sucked into the orbit of Worf's testicles and destroyed. Or Captain Picard's head tips into a time portal and it rejuvenates the hair follicles in his scalp, but they can't stop it. The hair just keeps coming. It suffocates everybody on the ship. And Data says, if we can't cut Picard's hair, it's going to destroy the universe. Something like that, right?
Of course, yes.
So you have a whole account of those. And we all read them and we all went, oh, they're amusing. They're lip curling, you know. Good fun. Good old fun, right? But here's the thing. It's a joke Twitter account, kids.
Right.
The idea that you would read those tweets and say, hey, you know what? We need to get hold of the guy who made that joke about Worf's testicles becoming the size of a moon. We need to get him to write a Star Trek TV show. Whoever thought that somewhere in secret hideout should be castrated.
Ed, you might know the Shatner did a very short-lived sitcom called Shit My Dad Says.
I didn't know.
And it was also based on a Twitter account of a comedy writer who was writing the quotes from his elderly father.
I think I vaguely remember that Twitter.
And you're right, man. Hey, this will make a great series. Well, maybe not. And clearly it wasn't, because it certainly didn't last beyond its first couple of weeks. But yes.
But I can understand why Shit My Dad Says might work as a sitcom. What I can't understand, and I'd be happy for somebody to educate me on this, is how you make the leap from tweets that are obviously satirizing Star Trek and obviously cannot work congruously within the Star Trek universe because they're flippant, surrealist jokes, to that becoming the foundation of an actual Star Trek television series. Those two things do not go together. In order for that to happen, you have to have somebody who's reading those tweets and says, I don't know anything about Star Trek, but I imagine that those tweets, that humor, would appeal to a certain youthful teenage demographic or whatever. And we're trying to stupidly split the Star Trek fandom up into demographic enclaves. And we're trying to make a show that appeals to every element of the fandom rather than make one show that appeals to all of them. Let's hire this guy and he can do a comic variant on the Star Trek universe.
Well, now, again, going back to, I'm sorry, Ed, real fast, I was going to say, that's the point they make at Star Trek Day, is that, hey, in this new era of Star Trek, there's a Star Trek for everyone. Please continue.
Well, I was just going to say, whoever thought that should, have been shaken by someone else and said, no. You see, you can't do that. You can't have that kind of humor in a real Star Trek show because it would destroy the universe in which it's supposed to be a part of. The two are not congruous. Not that type of humor. Star Trek sitcom could be done, but we need to think very carefully about how to do it. But all they did was they said to Mike McMahon, hey, we loved your tweets. Can you write that up as a TV show? He's like, yeah, I'd love to. I'm a Star Trek geek. I'm a fan. I've been waiting for this call all my adult life. I don't know how to write drama. I have absolutely no idea how to write a real Star Trek story. But can I write jokes about, a character's testicles becoming as large as a moon? You bet I can. Well, I can do that every week.
Langley points out it's weird because McMahon's show Solar Opposites, which is on Hulu, is a great show that is actually funny and has decent dramatics. I agree with that. Well, and even McMahon wrote some of the best Rick and Morty episodes that weren't dramatic per se, but like the Pickle Rick, the Die Hard as a pickle, your protagonist Rick.
Sure. But those shows, that's it. I mean, I haven't seen Solar Opposites, so I would defer to any fans of Solar Opposites. It could be that Mike McMahon's succeeded there where he's failed on Lower Decks. The problem he's got with Lower Decks is that because Lower Decks is ostensibly set in the Star Trek universe, it is, as we were saying earlier, hemmed in. he's constrained in what he can do in terms of the humor, because if he takes it too far, then it can't plausibly be Star Trek anymore. If it's too irreverent, it's like the disjoin between what we know and this becomes too big for us to suspend our disbelief that the two can coexist within the same universe.
It destroys the integrity of the basic Star Trek universe.
It destroys its integrity and so on, which is why when you see Tuvix, for example, you're like, okay, my first instinct was I didn't think anyone could ever ruin Voyager. Because Voyager on its own is pretty outlandish. But they found a way to make Voyager look even sillier than it really is. And it just annoyed me to hear, to see that happening, and for them to refer to things like deep cuts and so on. I hate the fact that all the characters on Lower Decks are early 21st century fans of Star Trek.
100%.
They talk the same way and they use the same vocabulary. I can't stand it. It drives me crazy every time somebody says, "Hey, that's a deepest cut," or whatever. You think, "Fuck you."
Absolutely.
They should not have that vocabulary. They shouldn't know what that means.
I completely agree. Yeah.
So that's what gets to me about it, John. That's why I find it very hard to enjoy. I want to relax. I want to let it wash over me. I want to slit my wrists and lie in the bath for an hour. But I just can't do it. Every time the razor gets close to the skin, I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to live.
Well, you're smarter than I am.
And watch my old favorite episodes of Voyager instead.
Oh God, I hear you, man. I so hear you. That is so fun. And actually, all right, Langley makes the point, and I meant to make it earlier. It's ironic because the show that is very Trek, like the Orville, wasn't made into a Star Trek series, but Lower Decks is nothing like Trek and got greenlit. Yeah, I do think the Orville does, and especially by the third season, has a very good balance of the silly and the serious. And man, what a triumph in their third, in my opinion. I don't know if we've talked much about the Orville in the past.
Well, that's interesting, because I think that what's happened with Seth MacFarlane was a bit like what's happening with Mike McMahon at set. That Seth MacFarlane, he naturally starts off with a comedy show. Why wouldn't he? That's his thing.
Of course.
But also, he's aware that I can't make a real Star Trek show because we don't have the rights to do so. So let's just sort of do an affectionate pastiche of Star Trek.
Sure.
But as he goes on, the fan in him that really wants to tell real Star Trek stories starts to take over, and the irreverence goes down and the dramatic integrity starts to rise.
Absolutely.
Now the problem is that Mike McMahon can't do that, because if he goes too far up in terms of the actual telling credentials, because there's no real comic potential in Lower Decks other than riffing off other Star Trek.
Yes.
If you stop doing that, it just becomes an animated Star Trek show. So you can't do it. You have to keep, mining, going back to the well, and keep asset stripping, because that's you've built a show on that alone.
Yeah. And again, I think, and I really, I don't want to subject myself to a focus group of younger, loving new Trek fans, but it does seem like they are more, again, they like the representation and the of new Trek, which I absolutely applaud. But as I keep saying, in the board game of life, that's only square one, and you got the rest of the game to accomplish. And well, look at all the fact that forgive me, everybody, I don't mean to, like when I do the jazz hands, to mock the LGBTQ community, the people of diversity, the idea that it is that. I truly don't. So I'm sorry if that offended anybody. I apologize. But my point is, that is so just the first step. What else do you have? And they don't have much. And that's what angers me is, we get it. Yes, you are here. You are represented on the show. That is great. What else is there about your character? Not much. And I'm sorry to say that about the relationship with the non-binary and trans people of Discovery, the doctor and the engineer, gay couple on Discovery, a lot of these things that, again, and in fact, in Star Trek Day, Discovery has certainly made its mark with its inclusion and diversity and respect to the LGBTQ community. Of course, wonderful. But you still got to do Star Trek. You still have to give us an action adventure sci-fi show that's smart and makes us think. These shows don't make you think. And again, I don't know what beyond the because Rob Burnett always keeps making the point, and I think he's right, that a lot of the fans are just satisfied with, oh, we're here. There's me on Star Trek. I feel like I'm being represented on Star Trek. That's great. And they're very satisfied with that. And maybe because this is their first Star Trek that they're watching in some cases, that's enough for them. But it's not enough for us.
But I think it's a symptom of the era in which they live. So, in fairness to them, I think that the main difference between a Star Trek fan who's like, say, 20 today and us, shall we say, the more seasoned veterans of the
seasoned,
is simple. That in our lifetime, we've seen a sort of an end to this idea that, you know, there's such a thing as a grand narrative, and that the arc of arc of history bends toward progress, and so on. We've suffered a loss of cultural confidence in the West, you know, particularly in the United States, the great hegemon that Star Trek represented in the 60s and the 70s. You know, Star Trek's confidence was America's confidence, you know, that you go out there and you spread the message and you do the good thing and you all unite behind a single identity and philosophy, and that is the human race, humanity. And we're now in an era where that is all being questioned and sort of has been, if you like, fragmented. So we're living in a kind of 21st century version of the fin de siècle, where everything is being questioned. You know, it's like the end of empires or whatever, and oh God, who are we and what are we about and all the rest of it. And because everything is now postmodern and meta and self-referential, and there's this idea that there's no such thing as a sort of unifying identity, that you're naive and stupid if you don't go into the fragmentary or intersectional elements of identity, like race and gender and all the rest of it. Those are the things you've got to talk about, because they're the relevant things. They're the things that actually, set your chances in life and all the rest of it. There's a pressure, I think, because the people who make Star Trek today have no science fiction credentials, but they have been captured by this sort of identitarian ideology, that they feel that that's how you make it relevant, by representing those elements on screen. Whereas the people who wrote Star Trek a generation ago thought the way you make it relevant is you tell the story of a future utopia where we're all under one flag, but we're all committed to progressive enlightenment values, the pursuit of knowledge, the betterment of oneself, and so on and so on. And cultural critics will say today, or some of them will say, you know, in Berkeley or wherever, yeah, but that's fine, but you're not talking about, you know, intersectional oppression and so on. That's naive. It's naive because that universal philosophy is, of course, the white Western view of how the future should be, and so on. So it's oppressive in some way. I hate that personally. I love the idea, because, well, I would say this as a white man, a white heterosexual man, but I love the idea of a future in which these elements of identity have been, if you like, demoted to the status of incidental, and where what really counts is how hard you work, what you do, wanting to expand your knowledge, and you live in a society that gives you the freedom to do that, in which somehow, we don't quite know how, but like, institutional bias has been removed.
We've gotten past it.
Is seen. And
Yeah.
Star Trek actually promotes a view of the future that makes that plausible, because, of course, once humanity meets other species, once it meets other races in space, if you like, it can't look inward anymore. It can't navel gaze. It can't spend its time thinking about, the 400 differences between genders or whatever, because if it does, it's going to get fucking annihilated.
Right.
Absolutely. Or whatever.
Absolutely.
Because they're secure in their identity and they know what they're about, and they're coming for you.
They're coming for us with weapons hot. Absolutely.
Right. Unless you've got a sort of competing ideology, a competing philosophy. And that philosophy is humanism. And I love that. That's why I like Star Trek. I don't think the people who make Star Trek now understand that, or rather, they've subscribed to a different view of life, which I'm gonna be bold and say will date New Trek very, very quickly, because I think ultimately
we'll see.
It's going to come back to this idea eventually that we're a happier people, a happier species, if we're not trying to subdivide ourselves into tiny little niche groups of political and social interest. Well, actually, we need to look at our common goals, and our common goals lie out there in the stars, not down here on Earth.
Well, this middle-aged white guy completely agrees with you, Ed. And it's nice to see Langley make this point as well. And he says the issue they only give lip service to diversity, but don't do anything with it. Jesse Gender, I don't know if you're aware of them, Ed, a trans person who's, I think, I don't always agree with Jesse, but I do think they are a very interesting critic, and I always appreciate watching their point of view. And I guess Jesse has a great video about this on season 2, about Strange New World season 2. And then also, as Langley says, what's upsetting is you can do both, integrate these issues and identities while also depicting the utopia of Star Trek. 100%, man. And again, going back to even just what we were saying about goofy episodes of Trek and Strange New Worlds, too many. There were goofy episodes of all the other Trek shows, but they also were wrapped into some sort of action adventure problem or whatever. And also it was like even the outrageous Okana episode, there was a whole thing about did he knock up an alien's daughter, and there are 2 warring factions going on. And I mean, unfortunately, they had Data trying to understand humor and had the great idea of having him learn her humor from Joe Piscopo, which I would have been in meeting one going, maybe somebody else.
Well, but somebody had to.
Well, and you could have had just Whoopi do it, because I think Whoopi Goldberg is a superior comedian to Joe. But regardless, I mean, that's the thing. It was always the humor is sprinkled in, and or even like Take Me Out to the Holosuite, DS9, the baseball game. It's like, okay, you got, as we've said before, you've got 22 episodes. You got room for one of these, and also you had this great petty Vulcan captain rivalry that Sisko was feeling and everything. And even finally, the rest of the crew are like, hey, man, we're supposed to be having fun, and you're taking this shit way too seriously. This isn't good. You look at how you're treating poor Nog and stuff like that. I mean, or rather, was it Nog or it was Rom? Pardon me, Rom.
Rom, yeah.
Nog actually knew how to play, kind of. But yeah, I mean,
you're right. There's plenty of room for humor in Star Trek. I mean, the idea that it's kind of po-faced and everybody's kind of got their finger on their chin and they're staring out of a window into deep space. That's not what it is.
Doesn't need to be just that.
It doesn't need to be just that. Of course there are humorous characters and humorous situations, but the point is that if it's all flippant, off the cuff stuff, then it becomes, I don't know, it loses something. It loses a dimension for me.
I so agree. No, I so agree. And again, that was my problem with the musical episode. That was my problem with Spock being human. Not only that, but just the fuck around with canon. Going back to the very short treks, they stress so hard that, listen, this isn't canon. We get that, fine. But again, you got to shit on James Kirk. And again, call him the captain, call him whatever you want. But that is clearly, I mean, also, you've got Erickson and Scotty, I mean, and Emrys and everything. I'm like, all right, this is clearly the animated crew. Well, that means that's Jim Kirk. And you could say, oh, it's the captain. Well, F you. I mean, really, it's like, that's adorable, but you can't gaslight us. We know what you're saying. And again, I just feel like we love Star Trek. And one of the main, we all love Spock, but we also love Jim Kirk. And it's like, sorry, man. And I know Shatner is not the nicest guy and certainly has his issues with, he had issues with the Berman era Trek. I mean, he outpriced himself for being on Enterprise as he could have been and stuff. Fine, those are his choices. But don't and again, I do think the new generation has a serious issue with Shatner because Shatner fights back. And they really hate it. And all it does is create more and more contempt for Shatner. Paul Wesley as Kirk is such a poor, watered-down Kirk. And again, it just seems like, well, this hatred of William Shatner is bleeding into, and and also that surface knowledge of Trek. Well, he hops from bed to bed. He's always kissing green aliens. Yeah, all the BS, and it's like, then you obviously haven't
Kirk
really
drift,
watched.
as they call it.
Yes, and I love that phrase. I learned that phrase this weekend. Kirk drift. That and plot armor was what I learned at the end of Strange New Worlds. When you have 5 of the 7 main characters as characters we all know will survive to the original series, and it's like, oh my God, all this jeopardy, and it's like, I'm sorry, but Mabega's going to survive. Chapel is going to survive. Now they've introduced Scotty. Good Lord, that was unnecessary. And can I really say fast too? The biggest waste of season 2 was not doing more with Carol Kane, who is a brilliant comedian and dramatic actress.
She grew on me as the season went on. The first time I saw her character, I was like, oh fuck, what's going on? What's she doing? But as it went on, you sort of thought, okay, I can see the potential here. But I think actually she's going to get replaced quite quickly. I think now they've brought Scotty in, I think it's just a matter of time before she says, hey, do you know what? I don't like being in deep space. I'm going back to the academy to teach. Take over, would you, Montgomery?
Oh, my man. Seriously, we are so on the same wavelength. That is exactly what I was saying as I reviewed the season and the last episode. I bet it happens in the first episode 5 years from now when the show finally comes back, however long it's going to take.
My God. I mean, the part 2 the part 1 of Strange New Worlds, story hegemony, depending on what side
you're on. Yeah, I never know properly.
I think it's hegemony in the US and hegemony in the UK.
Yeah, we do say hegemony. I think you're right. Absolutely, man. Yeah.
I have a feeling that's, I mean, it wasn't strong enough that you can wait like 3 years for the conclusion.
Well, and also the indecision on Pike's face and case, and I kept, because everyone's like, oh, this is just like the best of both worlds. No, it's not. And here's a great example. Here he comes. Mr. Worf, fire. There is no indecision in Riker's face.
The greatest TV cliffhanger of all time.
Absolutely. And Riker knew what he had to do. He didn't like it, but he knew what he had to do. And whereas orders, Captain. And it's like, come on. I'm like, again, they've already emasculated James Kirk and now Chris Pike. And also in that episode when Ortegas is doing the sweep, the down. Wow, Erica, you were born for this. It's like, we know she's a great pilot. And supposedly, as she says, well, you were a test pilot. Yeah, bud. And it's like, and I've had friends, nothing drives me crazier, Ed, when my friends invent things that I think should be expressed actually in dialogue and action in the show. And like, well, maybe they were thinking, and they're like, well, maybe Chris Pike was a different kind of test pilot. It's like, no, test pilots face life and death situations. No. No, if I will buy
the right stuff, right? He's done it all.
Yes. Oh, My God. And seriously, I feel like I'm in that film, The Snake Pit, where I'm the only sane person surrounded by crazy people. Like, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And it's like, no. And it's not your job to tell me that. It's their job to tell me that. And all they do is, like I said, I compared this look of Chris Pike's to this look of Curly Howard from the Three Stooges. And it's, it's like, come on, man. I don't come to Star Trek for our captains to be weak.
Oh, but here's the thing. Like, as about 1 million people have pointed out, so I'm happy to be 1,000,001. Pike shouldn't be in any doubt at all about what's going to happen because he knows he's going to live, right?
Well, there's that 100%.
There's no tension or jeopardy in
biggest
that
mistake.
scenario.
Yeah, biggest mistake is showing him his future in the chair.
He's going to be fine. He should be uber confident in that situation. He should be saying, hey, do you know what? Well, maybe I'll do this, maybe I won't, but it's fine because I know nothing can happen to me. I'm invulnerable. I know I've seen my future.
Yep. No, I agree with you. You know what else interests me? And again, I'm touching on some third rails here, I know, for some younger people and stuff. But I saw a group of critics on one of the nerd news websites discuss Pike winding up in the chair. And I believe there was a physically challenged person in the conversation. And they're like, well, life doesn't end and again, I'm using my words. Life doesn't have to end when you're faced with this kind of physical challenge. You'll find other ways. And it's like, no. He's not just in a wheelchair and doesn't have the use of his legs, or even a quadriplegic where he has no use of his legs and arms. He is almost catatonic. He can't speak. He's not catatonic. His mind is fine, but he can't even speak. He is down to beeps. And I understand the drama of that, but it's like, that is a much more different state of being than a quadriplegic would face, for example. And it's like, you can't minimize the limitations that that sort of life would face, and also being the demonstrative action person that he was. And it's like, no, I'm sorry, I disagree with you. I don't think you understand Pike's fate, and I also don't think you really saw it in that flash in Discovery where the time crystals show Pike his future. And it's the
menagerie has a very 1960s solution to the problem, which is, okay, he has no quality of life as far as they're concerned. They don't decide to go down the route that medical science can rejuvenate him in any way. Because, of course, they're bound by the footage that they're cutting in from the cage.
Well, so and the realities of 1960s medicine. Please continue.
Right. But they're constrained by the episode that they have to incorporate into the episode. So they come up with the solution. He goes to Talos 4 and he ends up imagining himself to be able-bodied and living a lovely life with that lady, I can't remember her name.
Ina.
Yeah. Who, of course, is also in reality decrepit and
trapped in a horrible body. Absolutely.
Trapped in a broken body and so on.
Yeah.
So that, it's sort of it's a solution that would have put a smile on the face of 60s television viewers. Oh, all's well that ends well, sort of. Whereas today, of course, it would be probably considered to be ableist or something like, they'd look at it and say, hey, he's saying he can only be fulfilled and happy if he imagines he's not disabled and so on. So, you could, if you were being willfully historically illiterate, say that it's problematic. But, the point I suppose I'm making is with Pike, as you say, they're hopelessly constrained by the fact that they've made this stupid decision in Discovery to give him a foretaste of his future. Probably at that time, not realizing that he would be reappearing in his own TV show. They thought it was a throwaway thing, their idiotic contribution to his backstory. And with Kirk, what is their problem with Kirk? Well, I mean, I think it was very much what Rob Meyer Burnett was talking about in his recent video. He was talking about Kirk drift, and it's worth seeking out that episode of Observations if you haven't seen it, because he reads out a very, very interesting essay in which the woman who wrote the essay points out that such are the things that you think you know about Kirk through cultural osmosis without actually even needing to see Star Trek, that it creates this sort of distorting veil through which, when you actually watch the show, it distorts your perceptions of Kirk's motivations, because in your own mind, you have a version of the character. You've been inculcated to believe that the character is a sort of callous, gung-ho womanizer, not borne out by the material in the actual original series, but you believe it so strongly, or you're being programmed to think it, that when you watch the episodes, you see it through that lens.
Indeed.
And we know that Alex Kurtzman and Bob Orsi certainly had fully, succumbed to Kirk's drift, if you like, to Kirk drift, when they penned the 2009 movie, because Chris Pine's characterization of Kirk is not Kirk. It is the cultural memory of Kirk as transmitted orally and in spoof and in pastiche in pop culture.
Yes.
That is this independent of the actual material,
indeed,
on which it's based. And so I don't know what people's problem with William Shatner is as a guy. I know he's a tricky kind of guy, and he's got a problematic, he's got a complicated relationship with Star Trek. We all understand that. But here's the thing. I'm prepared to forgive William Shatner almost anything. And here's why. Because he created one of the most iconic characters in TV history. And it would not be the same without him. You cannot separate the two, right? He is Captain Kirk. His characterization is Captain Kirk. And he brought a lot more to that than that he gets credit for, I think.
Ed, I don't know about British television, but here in the States, we have a rerun channel that runs both on a cable but also independently if you only have a digital antenna and you can pull it in. It's called MeTV, and they run classic Star Trek 6 nights a week.
All right.
Well, actually, excuse me, they run it 7. They run the original series 7 nights a week, but Sunday through Friday, they go from the original series to Enterprise, where they just have this massive 5-hour block of show after show after show, or 6-hour block, whatever the right total is. And it's like New Trek competes with that every time they have a new episode. And it's like, well, here's an example of how Star Trek used to be written. And it drives me insane that, as you say, it is this Kirk drift that informs the modern interpretation of the character and what Shatner brought to it and what the show brought to Kirk. And it's like, no, man, this is the guy. This is why we're still watching this stuff 57 years later. It's because it's compelling, interesting, and well thought out science fiction action adventure with interesting characters, even in the 60s, with all of the 60s biases and misogyny and everything, which is real. There's a reason why all the girls are in miniskirts on the original series, and Roddenberry.
That's 23rd century, mid 23rd century fashion, John. That's the way it was back then.
What are you going to do? I mean,
DS9 didn't make that mistake, did it? When they did Trials and Tribulations, yes, they showed Kirk as sort of somebody who was quite. In fact, they made a joke about it. I think Dax was saying, "Hey, he's so suave and good looking, isn't he?" And Cisco's like thinks he's talking about Kirk, but she's actually talking about Spock.
Absolutely.
Nice gag, nice joke. It's riffing on the stereotype, but it means that the writers of that episode are conscious of the stereotype. So
they got it. They
know that even though women were attracted to Kirk, of course they were. He's a charismatic, handsome young starship captain. That's not the point. The point is how he dealt with the women he encountered on his voyages. And he had real, serious relationships with women, not these frivolous girl in every port kind of cliche that we now think about, not the kind of stuff that was portrayed in the 2009 movie.
Well, Ed, as you know, they'll do these montages, video montages of just a quick 2 or 3 seconds. And yeah, it's really easy to make this montage of Kirk kissing the alien woman of the week.
Oh yeah, of
I'd
course.
be like, well, there you go. There's the proof right there. We're not editing anything. I mean, that's actual footage from the original series. And again, it's without context and without really understanding the stories. In fact, I don't remember the name of the museum guy on this first episode of Lower Decks, but it was a parody of Bijou Trimble, one of the original Star Trek fans that created the letter campaign to bring Star Trek back when the show was teetering after the second season. And she's still with us. She's an incredible Trek fan that goes back to the original series. I've never met her, but a lot of my friends have. And in fact, she is much more generous about new Trek. And she's like, Trek has always changed. I've watched it change from the original series to Next Generation and the rest of the Berman era shows to modern day. She's like, it may not be my cup of tea, but that's fine as long as it's still there. And God bless her for thinking that way. But they made this character's name as kind of an cute homage if you're really paying attention. And I've read so many reviews on modern news websites, and they even name the character, and I can't remember what the character's name is, but nobody's even picked up on. Yeah, that was a joke, man. That was a little mini tribute to Bijou Trimble, whose name is Bijou Trimble. Yeah.
I guess say just in the interests of balance, so that it doesn't sound like absolutely every minute of Lower Decks, is like somebody twisting my testicle. It's not. There are some jokes in it which are okay. In the second episode, which we haven't talked much about, there was a gag about Boimler trying to settle in new quarters on the Cerritos. Yes. And there was 2 good jokes. There's one about him being put in a room next to the warp nacelle. So he's got this terrible light flooding into his. That
was funny.
Which I liked. I thought it's a good joke. I like that.
Yes.
I like the idea of him being trapped between 2 holodecks, even though
that was funny too. I agree.
It doesn't make any sense on its face because you think, of course, obviously they'd have some degree of soundproofing or whatever. But it is a funny idea that he can hear what people are doing in these holodecks either side.
Yeah, that was good. You're right. I'm glad you pointed that out, Ed, because I hated the second episode so much that, like I said, just again, Marinor's storyline. I'm just like, again.
Yeah, I know.
I really felt like they've evolved Marinor's character a bit, and also, thankfully, the other 3 main characters are like, all right, she's off on one of her tears. Whatever, we're gonna do our thing. And I really love that. Like, and they even would put it in the trailers or the promos for last year, where she's like, I don't think I'm the boss of all you. Yeah, whatever, boss. Nice to talk to you, boss. And it's like, yeah, good, because they should be that cognizant of, man, this chick thinks she knows everything. And it is so annoying. And that's why, once again, I'm gonna full ransom. I'm gonna get myself fired. And it's like, why? Stop it. That's stupid. It's not funny.
I agree with you. But I think the reason, if I think about it, and I think why do those jokes with Boimler work, and something like the cute creature that sucks people dry doesn't work, and so on, it's because the Boimler gags are kind of grounded and situational. They're things that might happen to somebody.
Yes.
Of a lower rank on a starship, and there is humor there, and you think those jokes would not necessarily be out of place in a real Star Trek show. Surely someone's got to have the room next to the nacelle, and may not know that you can apply a filter to the windows to stop it.
Yeah, that was cute. Rutherford just did that.
Yeah. But when I look at the joke about the cute little sort of Japanese anime character that sucks people dry or whatever, which is a sop to the imagined viewer of Lower Decks and whatever, and their general sense of humor, I think that joke is as old as time. That's Monty Python and the Holy Grail and all the rest of it.
The Killer Rabbit. Yeah, the Killer Rabbit and Holy Grail. Absolutely.
I mean, it's so predictable because it's become a comic cliche. And when they did a gag about that prop, the luminous tube thing, I don't know what it's called. Someone will know what it's called. That joke is 40 years old. I first saw that gag in Airplane 2, for Christ's sake. Then when they're reaching for other things, they're not being particularly original or witty, or they should stop first and think, well, actually, has this been done? And has it been done better somewhere else? And where's the humor in our characters, in our situation?
Yeah.
How do we make them funny without relying on riffing on other things?
And we're only into the I mean, these was the 31st and 32nd episodes of Lower Decks.
Sure.
And not only are they still taking from other shows and other comedy ideas, but they're also like kind of, again, with Mariner's choices in that second episode. It's like, man, you guys can't get out of your own way. It's like, can't you come up with something else? These are I love. Well, well, but occasionally they can. I mean, I thought when Rutherford discovered his former persona, that episode of Lower Decks.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think that was one of the best episodes of Lower Decks. And further, and I've got a shot, I like the introduction of T'Lyn now as a regular crew member.
I like T'Lyn too.
That episode of all the other Lower Decks aliens, I'll even say it, that is a brilliant episode. That was a really great way of showing the Lower Decks ideas within the other alien races, and I thought it was executed quite well.
But again, why does T'Lyn work as a character? I would argue it's because the humor is, again, it's character based and situational. She's a Vulcan, and Star Trek has always mined a lot of humor out of the tension between the Vulcans' ultra logical, ultra rational, emotionless view of the world and the humans.
Right.
And T'Lyn is exactly the same.
Sure.
She doesn't actually say anything that's comically zany or funny. No. Her humor is grounded and based on not understanding them, right? Which is the same gag that, it's like, when Savick says to Spock, humor, it's a difficult concept. All of this stuff, when she says to him, oh, he's so human, when she's talking about Kirk, and Spock says nobody's perfect. Savick.
Absolutely. Or even the Kirk and Spock, or rather the Spock and McCoy arguments, Neelix and Tuvok. Exactly. So T'Lyn fits in with that tradition. Absolutely.
And they don't even need to try very hard to make her funny. All they have to do is keep her humorless.
Right. She's the straight man. Yeah.
She's the straight man. And as long as she continues to be the straight man, she will get the only laughs in every Lower Decks episode.
I hear you, man. I also like, and I never remember the name of the race, the alien race. I don't know about you, Ed, the Darmok episode of TNG. I am not a fan. Because I don't like it. It lacks a logic to me in terms of the metaphor that they speak in that language. But I do like the new character on Lower Decks that is from that world and is able to
Tamar, is it Tamar, something like that?
I'll take your word for it.
The Tamar is a river in southwest England. I don't think it's that. I think it's children of I think they're called Tamarians.
That sounds right.
Someone will know, but they're the children of Tamar or whatever.
But I do appreciate this character being on, and again, it is self-referential, as is 99% of Lower Decks.
I do like Darmok only because even if the concept is a little bit flimsy in terms of the choice of what the problem is with the lack of communication, the message of the episode is so beautiful and so beautifully done. It's hard not to.
Oh yeah, well, I'm a cold, heartless bastard, though. And if you haven't discovered that by our conversation, I'm and that's good because again, I appreciate your frustrations with Lower Decks, and like I said, I've been more sympathetic, at least with that first episode. So I appreciate the contrast today.
Darmok made me feel something. I
respect that.
I want to feel something watching an episode of Lower Decks. If that ever happens, I'll say there's hope for this show, but I wonder how long it's got to go on before we get it and whether we'll ever get it, frankly. I mean, to bring us on to a slightly wider topic, I wonder if there's any hope for any of these Star Trek shows as long as Secret Hideout are producing them. because I saw a video earlier today where there was a alleged rumor. I don't know if this is true or not, or if it's complete fantasy, that Paramount commissioned like a 5-minute proof of concept video for a show that was set sort of post Nemesis that was not connected in any way to the Kurtzman era Star Trek.
Oh God, let's hope that's true.
And that it's caused an almighty bust up. Like Alex Kurtzman is furious. He thinks they want him out. Apparently some people do want him out, but of course they've got to somehow get rid of Secret Hideout. And I'm sitting there thinking, because I know that some people out there think Star Trek Legacy is the answer. If Star Trek Legacy is greenlit, everything will be okay. But Star Trek Legacy, if it's produced by Secret Hideout, will always be artistically compromised, because
I would agree.
Have to exist within that wheelhouse. And I just don't trust. I don't think Terry Matalis, God bless him, hopefully one day he'll unblock me on Twitter, but no hard feelings, Terry. I hope that one day he's got that freedom to make the show that he wants, because I'm going to assume that with Picard season 3, they didn't quite leave him to his own devices. There were occasions when they said, hey, remember what's come before. Remember what the franchise you're now part of. It's got to be congruous with that. And that compromised Picard season 3.
I agree.
It would compromise Legacy. Even though I don't like the idea of a show that basically the Star Trek kids anyway. That I think Gene Roddenberry would have thought that it was just weird to have the children of Legacy characters.
And I say it a million times, Catherine Janeway or Ben Sisko did not need to be McCoy's niece, Kirk's grandson, you name it. And from the get-go with Secret Hideout, oh, wow, well, Burnham is Spock's sister. And it's like, fuck you. Yeah. Picard did not need, none of these great characters of Berman-era Trek needed to be a descendant of classic Trek characters. And in fact, it was an edict during, as you well know, the first few seasons of Next Generation. We're not going to talk about the old show. No, we're breaking new ground. And you're absolutely right about Roddenberry and stuff. And it's like, no, I think he would object to this Legacy show as well.
He'd say create your own characters, create new characters, look forward, don't look back, don't riff on what's come before. Give us a new set of people that we can get to know, and by virtue of getting to know them, they suggest their own stories because they've got their own backgrounds, their own worlds, all the rest of it. That was the guiding philosophy behind every successive Trek series in the Berman era. And it should be again, really, until they go back to that, until they get past this sort of postmodern asset stripping approach. Everything's got to be self-referential. Everything's got to link back to things that we know about, or we don't know what we're doing. Until we get past all of that, I don't see how Star Trek can connect with a new audience. I'm sure there are people, as you said, who love Discovery, who love Lower Decks. It's sort of their Trek. But whenever I've met a few of these people, whenever I meet them, the one thing that strikes me is that they don't really know much about Star Trek. They have a very casual sort of relationship with it. Oh, yeah, I like that show. It's okay, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't mean anything to them. If Lower Decks ended tomorrow, they wouldn't notice it was gone.
They at the end of Star Trek Day, they had that segment where the drag queen, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way, clearly this is a drag queen that was going out and asking people on the street, do you like Star Trek? What do you know about Star Trek? And it was all very basic, beam me up, Scotty, kind of references to Star Trek. And that's fine. And a lot of people are like, no, I really don't know Star Trek. Well, do you know what's the, who was the logical guy? Oh, it was Spock. See, you do know Star Trek. And it's like, once again, it's all surface stuff. Back to your point about hopefully introducing new producers to create new Star Trek. You've got to believe that the people above Secret Hideout, the Paramount people, see the real numbers and hear people like us that are like, we don't like new Trek for these reasons. And it's like, as you said, it's like, well, Star Trek used to be universal and we were able to make something that everybody liked. You've got to think that they, from a granular standpoint, are like, especially now that the post, oh God, now I'm forgetting his name, the guy that was running Paramount that got me tooed out, that ran UPN and CBS, Les Moonves.
Les Moonves, yeah.
Yeah, in this post Les Moonves run, and also now that Sumner Redstone kind of turned the company to his daughter and stuff. And I think there are more people upstairs in Paramount that actually like Star Trek and what it was, and can see the evidence of, well, we had millions more liking this product when it was made this way. And certainly, I would assume that season 3 of Picard gave him an inkling of, well, wow, even some of the harsh critics are liking this version of Star Trek. Why is it different? What makes it different? And I really hope that they are making those observations, and it's leading to choices that they will make in the future.
Allegedly, Alex Kurtzman hates Picard season 3.
I have no doubt.
I don't know if that's true, but I can completely believe it.
Well, because again, this other guy, this outsider from their bubble, although he obviously has his legacy towards the Berman era and stuff, came in. You know, the circumstances of Metalis running season 3 of Picard were Goldsman and Kurtzman were busy with other projects, and it was the 3rd season, and it was going to be a smaller budget, and like, all right, let's burn out, and also the failures of seasons 1 and 2 connecting with a larger audience. Fine, we're contractually obligated to do this 3rd season. You know, let the metaphor, let George do it, let Terry do it, and that's fine. And Terry was left to his own devices to a degree, and with limited resources, gave us a much more Trek-like and a much more entertaining season. So I'm sure Kurtzman hates him or hates it. And hates his success.
I think the fundamental reason he hates it is because it links to and continues an era of Star Trek that he hopes to overwrite. It makes it harder for him to overwrite it.
Indeed.
Particularly because people enjoyed it. You know, I had my reservations about it, as did you.
Sure.
But I would concede that it is obviously self-evidently the best season of Star Trek Picard, and maybe the only season of New Trek that felt like real Star Trek that we've had. And you know, warts and all, problems and all. But, you know, I would rather be fucking thinking about the issues around how did the Borg Queen meet the changelings. I'd rather be focusing on that than thinking about, is this Star Trek at all? You know, you don't, we, in a sense, in the past, we didn't know how well we had it. We used to be arguing over plot holes and things like that. Now we're arguing about whether or not the shows themselves are really the thing that they're supposed to be.
Agreed.
It's crazy.
You're so right, man. Well, Ed, is there anything we haven't covered that you wanted to talk about today? Because I love where the conversation is going.
Well, you know, just the state of the world generally, John. But no, I mean, I guess all I would say, right, in conclusion, if you like it was Star Trek Day over the weekend.
Yes.
57 years old. And by the way, it was very funny if you do watch that Robservations episode that everybody assumed it was Rob Mayer Bennett's birthday.
Including me, Ed. I swear to you, I wished him a happy birthday. He's like, John, it's not my birthday. And I'm like, the way the title read, I thought
I felt for him after like the 59th person got in touch to wish him a happy birthday. But anyway, here's the thing. We should be. So it's amazing that Star Trek is still going after 57 years in some form. My dream is that by the time we get to the 60th anniversary, it's no longer in the hands of Secret Hideout.
Please.
And that it can be relaunched, if you like, on its 60th birthday with a new creative team, because there will be people out there who are watching New Trek who must be spitting blood thinking, fuck, if only I was in charge of this franchise, the things I could do, the ideas I've got, you know, put me in charge. And I know there are people that say, yeah, go back to Ronald D. Moore, go back to those guys. Maybe you need to. Maybe you need that connective tissue in the same way that DC Fontana co-wrote, I think, Encounter at Farpoint. You know, maybe you do need to have that linkage. But the objective of whoever show runs the next generation of Star Trek, if you like, should be to bring writers on board who understand its central appeal and understand what it is and understand the universe in which it takes place and what structures that universe, what philosophy structures that universe, that overarching grand narrative about human progress, which is not inward looking and not divisive and not focusing on aspects of individual identity, but is actually thinking about how to advance the species and the threats and challenges to our humanist philosophy that we face out there in the stars. That's the kind of show that we want. And if we can get that show, then Star Trek will be relevant to a new generation of people the way it's relevant to us. If we don't get that, what will happen is all of these shows that we're talking about, Lower Decks, Strange New Worlds, whatever, they will fizzle away and disappear and will be forgotten because they have no cultural footprint. The people who watch these shows like them well enough. They talk about them on Twitter for a bit. Hey, I fucking love the musical. Fuck you. Okay. A year from now, you won't remember it. There's no intellectual content in New Trek. And there's nothing to stimulate thought and to appeal to those people out there in the world who feel that they're fundamentally alone in some way. And they look to this grand narrative that used to be evinced by Star Trek and say, wow, I'd love to be a part of that. That appeals to me, not because, as many people have said, you see yourself in the characters. You don't. You look at the characters and you say, I'd love to be on a ship with those guys because they're the type of people I wish I knew, but I don't. And that they represent something that resonates with me, not because it reminds me of myself, but because it represents a certain philosophy or principle or sense of daring, that I wish that I had.
Aspirational. Yeah.
Inspirational, aspirational.
Yeah. Yes.
And so that's my dream. But if there is a coup underway within Paramount right now to get rid of Alex Kurtzman and Akiva Goldsman and all of these mindless, imbecilic hacks, if that's happening as we speak, you have our blessing. God bless you. Go for it. And if it needs to get violent and bloody, well, so be it.
The YouTube that surprised me this weekend, and again, I don't know if it's fact or rumor, was at Warner Brothers that they canceled J.J. Abrams' contract, which was made before James Gunn taking over the DC universe.
What a fall from grace.
Perhaps if that is true, that maybe the same could be said for Secret Hideout and Company. I certainly hope so. Yeah. Ed, remind people of where they can find you online.
Well, you can read my Star Trek reviews if you dare at Opinionoid. That's edwhitfield.wordpress.com. And you can find me on YouTube at Dr. McElvoyd, where occasionally I pop up and talk crap like this for a while.
Well, I'm always happy that you talk crap with me like this as well. So perhaps at the end of Lower Decks season, we can talk again. My God. Yeah. And then we're going to face let's come back to it when it's all over. But I think we both know in our heart of hearts, don't we, that it's going to be another 8 episodes of nothing, but we'll see. Maybe they'll prove us wrong. Well, I have better feelings for this than the dreaded return of season 5 of Discovery, which will also be wonderful grist for the mill for us to discuss.
Oh yeah. I'm looking forward to it in an awful sort of way.
Oh God, that 5-minute bit of Berman on the surface of the ship while they're in warp.
Yeah, she didn't get pulled into the warp field and dissipated, sadly. But
we were hoping.
You can't have it all.
Oh. And as always, man, thank you for taking a good part of your evening talking to me about this. As always, I
always a pleasure, John. Thank you very much.
I feel the same way, man. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for watching and listening. More Great Word Balloon coming up this week. It was tough with everybody being in Baltimore at the Baltimore Con, but we'll have more content for you in the days ahead. In fact, tomorrow, my buddy Rodney Barnes, talking about the HBO show Winning Time, the LA Lakers dynasty, will be on, and also talk about his comic book work, and also, Dan Slott coming on Tuesday, and lots more coming up this week. So back to normal with a lot more shows. So thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.